Prophecy, the letter of Albert Pike. Welcome, good evening. Welcome to Sefer Moments. This is Stephen Pigeon. And tonight we're going to be having a very good discussion about the prophecy found in the letter of Albert Pike and its relevance to today's news. I want to thank you for joining me and thank you for subscribing to our channel. Remember that if you'd like to chat during this particular broadcast, you need to be a subscriber. It's easy to do. Doesn't cost you any money. You just hit the subscribe button beneath the video there, and you'll be in like Flynn. And so I'd like to welcome all those of you who are here. It is certainly a great blessing to me that you're part of the subscribers to this channel and that you're participating in the chat. And I particularly thank you for joining us, Pauline Buffalo Bull Lodge. It's good to have representatives from your neck of the woods. Absolutely. We live in kind of the same community. Lance Walden is here, Judy Keel, Sherry Slama. Hi, Sherry. Chris Pierce, Pat Ladd, James Hilly. Speaking the Truth is with us. Marcus G., Katrina Church. And Matthew Noonan's here. Hi, Matthew Noonan. David Morgan. Shalom, brother. Jim Meyer. Hey, it's good to see you, Jim. And of course, Eileen and so on. Jim Simmons. I'm just glad that all of you are here. And we're going to be able to talk about this. I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. And it's one that is kind of a follow-up to what we did the last time we did a presentation here on Sefer Moments, which was 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the dragon, Draco, and how it occupies a third of the heavens, and its 10 stars and 7 heads and so on. We're going to be looking at that prophecy again today, and we're going to be seeing yet another analysis that hopefully will unfold what's going on. But before we do, we have to talk about Albert Pike. Now, it's kind of surprising because the more I look at Albert Pike, the more surprising he is as really he is really the father of modern America. He is the one that led America in a specific direction for many, many years and dominated the field. And he dominated the field primarily because he rose to chief cook and bottle washer at the Scottish Rite Masonic lodges. In other words, he was the supreme guru of the Masons, and he was also the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. So Albert Pike had a tremendous amount of authority. In fact, it is said that when Andrew Jackson took the presidency, he believed himself subservient to Albert Pike because of his oath of allegiance at the Masonic Lodge. And again, I remind you that the Scottish Rite Masonic Lodge is a secret order, and it's a secret order that Albert Pike did obtain a 33rd level in the Masonic order. And this Masonic order controls the government of the United States, always has, and probably always will. And Albert Pike was the chief controller of the Masonic order for really the vast majority of his life. And he was known, he wrote a number of books, including a whole treatise on the 33rd degree. He also was an ardent and a strident racist. And he took the position that there should be no one in charge of America other than white people and the people of the white race. And as a result, he rose to prominence as the head of the Ku Klux Klan. And ultimately, he would become, and he's pictured here in his Confederate uniform. He was a general, a brigadier general in the Confederate Army fighting on behalf of slavery. And it's quite interesting that Albert Pike, a Ku Klux Klan member, a Scottish Rite Mason, whose best friend was a fellow named Mazzini, who would, with the permission of the Vatican and the Jesuit order, create the Italian mafia in the United States. And because of its connection to the Masonic order and to the Jesuits, the Italian mafia was given pretty wide berth in the country, free license, if you will. All right, I want to welcome all those who are here from Chile, like JJ, and I think Blackie might be here as well. Jessica Knock, thank you for being here. I know it's late where you are in the UK. Thank you for getting up this late to help us administrate this show. Russell Shude, Straussa, Angie Adams, and of course, Gerson Garaseb, Ruby Costello. Hi, Ruby. It's good to hear from you again, my Gypsy Queen. Thank you for checking in. It's beautiful to see you. Okay, and so continuing on, Albert Pike. So here you have a Confederate general, racist, head of the Ku Klux Klan, leader of the secret Masonic order, being exalted in a statue in Washington, D.C. Now, this statue was knocked over during the protest. I believe it was in 2020. And in 2020, we saw that the this was BLM and other nihilists, or if you will, anarchists. I prefer nihilist over the term anarchist. Uh, the nihilist was a phrase used in the 19th century to describe people who were interested in destroying all trappings of anything, any form of governments whatsoever. Anarchists, on the other hand, just preferred, shall we say, a very limited government to the point of non-existence. And there's a little bit of difference there. Okay, so here we see this fellow who was controlling Andrew Jackson. You might recall Andrew Jackson got his fame by forcing the Bank of England out of the country. He would not allow the Federal Reserve System. We know now that the Federal Reserve System is the enemy. The Federal Reserve System is the enemy. And as Ron Paul recently said, if you really want to make America great again, change up 1913. That is to say, get rid of the Federal Reserve Act and get rid of the Income Tax Act and push both of those back. Now, to Trump's credit, I'm going to say this about Trump. His idea of pushing these tariffs are very interesting because a lot of people don't know this. He's going to put tariffs on Canada. He's going to put tariffs on China. He's going to put tariffs on Europe. Well, he's not putting tariffs on them. I mean, that is the language. But the truth is that you paid the tariff, not somebody in Germany, not somebody in Canada, not somebody in China. The whole point is that if you have let's say you have a 2x4 in Canada, and this 2x4 costs $10, and it costs $10, it costs $12.50 to make it in the United States. So if you put a 25% tariff on the Canadian 2x4, when it crosses the border, it too costs $12.50. But you're paying that $2.50, and that $2.50 is going to the US government. Tariffs are how this nation survived before we got to the income tax. The income tax was created by the crown and by the central banks literally in order to pilfer and rape the economy of the United States. And it has. Real income and real value has gone. When you think back into the year 1900, when William McKinley, for whom Mount McKinley was named after, William McKinley was the last one to mint a 1-ounce gold coin. And the 1-ounce gold coin at the time of William McKinley was a $20 coin. What is it now? What is it now? Closing in on 3,000, and they're saying it may have an upper end of 12,000 and up, given the shortages and the demand for gold right now. Well, wow. Okay, so it went from $20 at 1900 to being frozen at $32 during FDR, even though the value of gold at that time was 34 something, to now exploding to 100-fold that number. So it's just amazing. Now, what does it mean that the price of gold is now 100-fold its number? Well, what it means is that your fiat currency has been devalued 100 times. That's what it means. That's why your real income has not moved up since 1973, when we came when we came into the petrodollar. Once we became the petrodollar, your income hasn't gone up. No matter how much inflation happens, your income has not gone up. So as you can see, that this transition that took place with Trump moving into tariffs now is really going to be a methodology that is causing not only us to replace the income tax for funding the federal government, but it's also going to force Europe, Canada, Japan, China, and all the rest of them that are being hit with tariffs to replace their income with tariffs rather than income taxes. In other words, he's changed the whole focus as to how the government will gather money. And it's really, I think it's quite beneficial. And if we can get rid of the income tax, if we live on tariffs, we get rid of the income tax, hallelujah, what a great day it will be. They estimate that it costs the American economy at least $600 million a year just to file for income tax. Okay, so these kinds of things have to go away. The tariff is a much easier situation, and then you can avoid paying taxes by simply not buying foreign goods. If you don't want to pay the tariff, don't buy the Audi, right? I mean, that's the trick, right? Okay, so with that being said, nonetheless, Albert Pike's statue in 2020 was tipped over by the BLF Antifa rioters, who we now know were all paid by USAID. Now, I mean, I've known for a long time that most of Antifa are school teachers. That's why they only rioted in the summer, because they didn't have anything to do. During the year, they couldn't riot because they were busy teaching elementary school and junior high to your kids how to become radical extreme Marxists and woke individuals who were highly racist and over-sexualized. So this is what was going on with our so-called Antifa BLM movement. And now we know the leadership for BLM was, of course, pocketing a lot of money. Kind of reminds you of Vladimir Zelensky, right? Mr. I can't account for $100 billion. And it turns out that wasn't, the on the books number was close to 200 billion. That wasn't the whole number, right? Because USAID was in there big time. USAID was funding anything and everything, both sides of the aisle, including providing guns into the Gaza Strip, providing ammunition to Hezbollah, providing tents for ISIS and al-Nusra. Oh, yeah, who do you think funded and created those guys? It was USAID. The whole war on terror was created by USAID so that we could fight ourselves and our proxies somewhere else in the world. Otherwise, the military-industrial complex would have gotten bored and might have gotten defunded. Oh no. Well, anyway, so here's Albert Pike. His statue gets turned over. Of all the damage done in Washington, D.C. in the 2020 riots, the only thing Donald Trump was concerned with was restoring the statue of Albert Pike. That was the only thing he was concerned with. Restoring the statue of Albert Pike and making sure that it was protected. Why? Because Albert Pike is the spiritual leader of America in the personal flesh. Okay, he's the spiritual leader of America. And his counterpart would spring up later, which would be Aleister Crowley in Great Britain. And he was, when we read this letter of Albert Pike, you're going to see that he was a Luciferian. He was a notorious Luciferian, 33rd level Mason, Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, and Confederate general, and was in fact the boss of all of those who were in secret societies. And to this day, just as the French pay obeisance to the Sun King Louis XIV to this day, so does the American leadership pay obeisance to Albert Pike, okay? The Grand Master, the Great Dragon. All right. All right, so let's get into it here. All right, so what do we know here? Okay. Okay, so first of all, we're going to be looking at some scripture today, and when we do, we're going to be taking these quotes from the Sefer Millennium Edition. Now, Penny has told me to warn everybody, don't get antsy about the large print edition yet. We're expecting it to come in, but there's been a lot of freight issues in trying to get the books shipped in. So the large print edition is going to be here before the end of the month, okay? Before the end of this month. So if you're looking for a large print edition in the FlexiBind, which, I'm not going to brag, I already have my copy, sorry, but I'm an insider, they could send one directly to me. The inside copies are going to be coming, they're going to be here, and they're going to be absolutely beautiful. Okay, and we're going to be quoting from that today. All right, in the markers of our recent history, 3 events stand out as readily identifiable and easily remembered: World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. Now, in fact, in Britain, World War I is kind of, well, let's just say that World War II is a continuation of World War I, and it's considered the Great War. It is the war that is the game changer in Britain. It was the war that ended the Victorian Empire of Britain and began its downturn. That began in World War I, when no one knew that there would be those kinds of deaths that were going to be taking place. No one knew that there were going to be those kinds of deaths taking place in Central Europe when World War I started, although they could have taken warning from us in our Civil War, when we fought a very similar style of warfare on the battlefield. And that kind of warfare that we fought was what they would end up fighting in Central Europe, which, by the way, is the same warfare they're fighting in Ukraine. The difference is now is that that war in Ukraine is being done with drones and hypersonic missiles. The air, so-called air superiority is not really a relevant factor unless you're talking about flying drones. That's the relevant factor. So we see World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. And these are the huge markers of the 20th century. If you can go back and say, well, what about the war on poverty? Is that a big marker? What about Vietnam? It is for those people who served in Vietnam. What about Korea? Well, yeah. What about Ronald Reagan? What about the fall of the Berlin Wall? What about this? What about that? What about the other thing? Well, yeah, and more yeah. Okay, for sure. But the question is that when you're talking about, hold on just one second, if you would. I got to make sure that I can kind of get this up here in rate here. Just a moment. So when we're talking about this idea of these markers, when you go back and you look and you say, well, what exceeds World War I? Well, the Great Depression was of great significance, lasted a decade, some places longer. And then World War II, the rearming and the refighting, which, when you talk about the numbers of humanity that were lost on the battlefield, I mean, this was huge, huge, huge. Like, to give you an example, the Russians, the Soviet Union, let's call it the Soviet Union lost 27 million people during that war. That includes Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, etc., all of the Soviet bloc countries. Germany lost some 18 million people. Britain lost an entire generation of young men, as did France, at least in World War I, they did. They lost an entire generation of men. If you ever get a chance to hear a great piece of music, Elegy to Dunkirk, and the best recording, in my opinion, is the Jeff Beck recording, Elegy to Dunkirk, with Olivia Peel. No, Olivia. Yeah, anyway, I forget her name now, but she does a brilliant job of singing the angel over this great debacle that took place in Dunkirk at the opening of Britain's entrance into World War II. And so anyway, these things were huge markers, not to mention, the genocide that took place against the Jewish people. And this followed the genocide against the Orthodox Russians, the genocide that took place against the Ukrainians and the Holodomor, the genocide that is going to follow that in China. This was a massive, massive, tumult, a massive exchange, a massive overthrow of all kinds of civility, and the kinds of quietness that we had more or less in the 19th century became death and destruction in the 20th century. You can still go to this day. You can go into Frankfurt, or you can go into Dresden, or you can go into Berlin, and you can see that there's no historic buildings because they got flattened into pulp. And the only historic buildings you see there are the ones that were rebuilt later on to look historic. Okay. So these were the large markers of human tragedy in recent memory, unlike any other time in history. Now we see a rapid pulse of events increasing towards a violent climax, which promises even greater destruction than seen before. Okay. Now, this is the kind of thing that's on the table right now, is this discussion of a third world thermonuclear war. Now, the way it stands right now, the nukes have always been the notoriously, final end of the story for the destruction of mankind. But now there are weapons that are superior. We have these hypersonics, and we have these hypersonics with these massive warheads that are non-explosive. And these warheads come in at high rates of speed, and they do the destruction of a meteor hitting the ground and are incredibly destructive without leaving a radiation trace. We also have, I've seen this develop recently, and it's being now starting to be announced, that the United States is introducing laser anti-missile technology. For those of you who are, up on this, we know that the speed of light moves faster than a hypersonic missile. The question is, can the speed of the targeting move faster than the hypersonic missile? That's going to be the big question. But nonetheless, I've already seen these things deployed, that they're testing them in the South Pacific right now. These anti-aircraft laser, high-powered laser devices for destroying drones and etc. Now, as an anti-drone device, the laser is a highly effective system because the drones are slow speed. So the lasers will be highly effective. But When you're talking about this, using it against hypersonics, it's going to be a different story. Also, many of you who follow on Telegram, we get a lot of our news on Telegram. I saw recently a very interesting discussion about where we are with AGI and the deployment of cyberborgs and robots. And, watching videos of dogs outrunning men at full speed, watching a video of these four-wheeled creatures flipping over and going through the battlefield, climbing stairs, jumping off cliffs, robots running through really difficult terrain, woods, guys trying to knock robots over with a baseball bat and having no effect, unmanned tanks, unmanned fighter aircraft, unmanned helicopters, unmanned submarines, unmanned this, unmanned that. And now we know the discussion while we're talking about that, and I'm going to get more into this AI situation after we cross the threshold of World War III. When we talk about this AGI perspective, wait till you see how much AGI can already do. They're saying, oh, it's going to be here in 2030. Well, try again. One man, a notorious Supreme Grand Commander of the United Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Freemasonic Organization, Supreme Grand Commander of the Supreme Council of the leadership of the Scottish Rite, the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, and the General of the Confederate Army had something to say about not just World War I, World War II, but also World War III. According to the website Three World Wars, and that's at threeworldwars.com, Albert Pike 2 HTM, Albert Pike received a vision, which he described in a letter that he wrote to Mazzini, dated August 15th, 1871. Now, I've been reading about this letter now, I think, for maybe 40 years. Something like I think I saw this letter for the first time in the early 80s. Okay. I saw it in the early 80s. And this letter has been around for a long time. And Mazzini, of course, was Pike's friend who would create the Italian mafia in the United States. That was Mazzini. And they brought in, and what is the Italian mafia? It's a second government, right? It's a second government. It's a government within a government. So that when you're against any mafia, whether you're the Italian mafia, the Jewish mafia, the Russian mafia, makes no difference, the Chinese mafia, whatever mafia you're up against, they have their own set of rules. And those rules are not written down, but they're well known. And they're well known to the point that some of the leadership inside the Italian mafia, one of the mob leaders out of New York, was known to be able to sentence somebody to death with the move of one eyebrow, right? So what you can see here is that the second government created by the Italian mafia brought in its own rules. It had its own lending practices, it had its own protection racket, and it had its own structure, the capo and the capo di capo, etc., of the guys who would be running the Italian mafia. And so anyway, this was Mazzini responsible for that. Good friend of Albert Pike. This letter graphically outlined plans for the three world wars that were seen as necessary to bring about the New World Order. Now, what's important about Albert Pike's New World Order, and important for us to see it here, is that Albert Pike envisioned a Luciferian one world order. Okay? Not a messianic one world order, but a Luciferian one world order. All right. In Pike's letter to Mazzini, he predicted three world wars. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati, and remember that the Illuminati were formed in 1776, and they were formed in 1776 by Weisberg in Austria. Same time the United States was formed. And the Illuminati were people who had secret light to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agentur, agents of the Illuminati, between the British and the Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. Agents, agentur, okay? And so at the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Well, communism did in fact weaken the religions. It certainly weakened Christianity. And when communism was practiced in the Soviet Union, to give you an example, they would do things like this. They would bring a child in public school, first year in public school, second year in public school, And they would ask the child, do you believe in God? And the child would say, well, yes, I do. My parents do, and we're Orthodox and we believe this. And the teacher would say, okay, well, look, I want you to pray this morning. I want all of you to pray to your God for your lunch. And the rest of the class, we're going to pray to Stalin for lunch. And then lunch would come along, and all the kids who prayed to Stalin would get lunch, and the kids who prayed elsewise would get nothing. And this would go on for a week or 2 weeks until they had converted the first graders, the second graders, and the third graders to a perfect understanding that Stalin was, in fact, their benefactor and no one else. Okay, so communism was going to be uh, created by agent provocateurs. Who are these agent provocateurs? Well, they were all plants that were funded by the banking cabal out of New York and London, the Rothschild family being the spearhead. But it was also Jacob Schiff, it was also Dale Carnegie, it was J.P. Morgan, and others who were funding Vladimir Lenin, Ulyanov, who called himself Lenin, Yosef Jugashvili, who called himself Stalin, uh, Lev Bronstein, who would call himself Trotsky, Noah Mordecai, who would call himself Karl Marx. All of these were funded by the banking cabal as agent provocateurs to establish this idea of communism, to build out this Marxist empire, and to essentially overthrow one of the most religious countries in the world. In fact, Moscow, at the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, had more churches than any other city on earth. Okay, so this did in fact happen. Communism was in fact put in place. And this happened in the First World War. So the First World War was this ridiculous culmination of events between cousins who, somebody lit the match, arguably Igor Stravinsky lit the match, and then the flame caught in the Balkans. And when the flame caught in the Balkans, everybody armed up and started shooting. And the next thing you know, the entirety of the map in Europe changed. Go back and look at a map from 1910 or 1912. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire, France, the Germanic, the German had just been united under Bismarck, right? The Prussian Empire, the Russian Empire, all of these empires, the Ottoman Empire dominating the geography in Europe, and all of this is going to change. There is going to be no Russian Empire at the end of the war. There's going to be the Soviet Union. There's not going to be an Austrian-Hungarian empire at the end of the war. That's going to be broken up entirely, balkanized, as they say, and fragmented into a group of countries. Germany is going to suffer, and in fact, the Kaiser is going to fall, and a secular government is going to arise thereafter. Only Britain remains as a kingdom, and they had suffered staggering losses. But the religious in Russia, the Orthodox in Russia, overthrown by the communist agent provocateurs, who then imposed atheism at the point of a sword in the Soviet Union. The Second World War, this is Albert Pike's letter. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism is strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Okay, so here you go. Very interesting setup right here. Now, discussing fascism versus Zionism. Interesting that Albert Pike is going to pose those two against each other. Where's the other conclusion? Well, let's talk a little bit about political Zionists, because in order to understand the difference between fascism and political Zionism, we're going to have to segregate some of that ideology, because the fascism is denoted by a hyper-nationalism. And remember that fascism was a term coined by Benito Mussolini, who used the word it comes from the Roman word fascia, and fascia is a bundle of axe handles with axe heads along the various levels of the handles that was used to indicate the authority of a judge to make a decision and to impose a sentence. That's called the fascia. And it's a bundle of axe handles with axe heads up and down the axe handles. There are two of these fascia. One is to the left and one is to the right of the speaker's podium at the House of Representatives in the United States, indicating very clearly that the House of Representatives is a fascist organization. This fascia, fascists that would appear on the back of the Roosevelt dime. Go back and look at the Roosevelt dime. That had a fascist symbol, the fascia on the back of the dime. Roosevelt was most assuredly a fascist. Well, the fascist, one of the critical aspects of fascism is that fascism was also tied to nationalism. Oh, you might say nationalism. What are you talking about? Well, I remind you that the government that rose to power as a fascist government in Germany was controlled by the National Socialist Democratic Party of Germany. They would become known as the Nazis, National Socialist, standing for Nazi. National Socialism. Benito Mussolini, he was a nationalist. The leadership in France, they were nationalists. King in England, he was a nationalist. The only people who weren't nationalists were the communists who favored an international communist order. Well, why is Albert Pike referring to that as Zionism? Because under the doctrine of Talmudism and the Talmudic form of politics, you see this notion of the idea of a very small, super supreme elite controlling a large body of cattle or chattel property called the lumpen proletariat. So the whole thing was sold to Russia. You're a workers' nation, a workers' society controlled by workers, where from each according to his ability and to each according to his need is the protocol that's followed. When in fact, the from each according to his ability went to the super elite, and from the super elite, you just barely got what you needed. So this is why Brezhnev's daughter could drive down the streets of Moscow in a $300,000 Ferrari, and there was nobody else on the road because they couldn't get their $4,000 Lada started, right? Okay, so the super elite would control a very small body of super elite. A handful of people would be dominating and controlling all of the Soviet Union, taking from them all their wealth and giving them just barely what they needed. When the Russians or the Kazakhs or the Belarusians or the Latvians or Estonians or the Ukraini failed to work hard enough in the factories, well, Stalin just started imposing terror. Well, take 250 out and shoot them this weekend. Kill another 2,000 this month in Yekaterinburg. We need 5,000 more dead over here. And it was just a slaughter, an unbelievable slaughter of 66 million people over the tenure of Lenin and Stalin in the Soviet Union. This is political Zionism. It is a super elite group controlling the rest of the world. Now, you can see this now in the expression of Noahidism. The expression of Noahidism is essentially this. We who are elite, the superior race, we who have two souls compared to you who have one, we have the Torah, we have the 10 Devarim, we have the name of Yah. This belongs to us. To you belong the Noahide laws because you are Noahide only. So you get only 7 laws, and these are Noahide. And if you're going to be considered even worthy of keeping alive at all, you need to call yourself Noahide and come under these laws. Otherwise, you're an idolater and you're basically chattel or cattle, and we have the right to treat you that way. And these are not my words. These are the words of Menachem Schneerson, who was the head of Chabad Lubavitch, in a speech that he gave in Tel Aviv back in the early 1990s. Okay. So here you see Albert Pike is delineating very clearly between fascism and political Zionism. Political Zionism is one world order controlled by a super elite where the lumpen proletariat own nothing and are happy. Fascism, on the other hand, is expressed as a form of nationalism where people of the same language essentially form borders around themselves and become sovereign decision makers in their own locality and to their own people, not allowing any other law to be superior to the sovereign law of the state. Okay, but communism is going to be kept vital and kept alive during this period of time in order to offset Christendom. Well, now this is a very interesting thing that's happened in the modern world because we have the communist world that engaged after World War II in what was called the Cold War. Now, a lot of people said you might remember the commie scare that happened in the 1950s under Eugene McCarthy. Have you ever been or were you a member of the Communist Party? And then everybody would say, it wasn't me, it was you. Okay, well, we have to kick you out of Hollywood because there was a war on communism. What was the fear? Well, the fear had to do with the fact that Stalin's organizations had created a thing called the International Komsomol, and it was openly advocating communist overthrow in every nation on earth. Don't think that wasn't happening. It was happening. It was happening as political dialogue all over the world to allow the communist elite to control the whole world. We have the same propaganda going on today. They just use different words. They don't call it communism. They call it the New World Order. They call it the Great Reset. They got a whole bunch of names for the same thing and the same result. Okay? Now, when you get to the end of the communist experiment, which was a 90-day, it was a 70-year famine of the word in Russia. This had to do with why Yah judged Russia to provide a 70-year famine. I don't know. I suspect there was a lot of decadence between about 1890 and about 1921. There was a huge level of decadence that took place in Russia that nobody is describing, that nobody is, telling us in print. Very few people know that this thing actually existed, but it was a very decadent period in that history. For those of you if you want to see the white cap of that wave, go look at the life of Rasputin, the Orthodox priest advisor to the Tsarina at that time. And there was a great deal of scandal associated with Rasputin, who eventually was assassinated by cousins of the Tsar in St. Petersburg, which took a lot of work. They had to poison him, knife him, shoot him, put him in chains, and throw him in the river, and he eventually died of exposure. Okay. So, with that being said, Russia goes into a 70-year dark period, 70-year famine from 1921 to 1991. And then suddenly the Soviet Union ends. Now, a lot of people blame Gorbachev, but let us say that this was the hand of Yah saying, your 70 years are over. It is now time for you to bloom again. And it's very interesting that in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, the same time George H.W. Bush was making a deal to control the White House for the next 24 years, including controlling Bill Clinton and Hillary in office for 8, his son in for 8, and Barack Obama in for 8, all of which was predetermined in 1991. And when that happened, the United States began to crumble. The United States began to be infected. The United States came down with the curse of communism. The United States is still cursed with communism. About half the people in the country are now atheist communists. About half the people in our country. So this communism is very interesting because the balance of communism versus Christendom was originally between Russia and the United States, and now it's between the United States and Russia, the United States being the corrupted communist and the evil empire, and Russia being the Christian empire. What is this? This is what happened. Okay. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leader of the Islamic world. Okay, so this is key. What's going on now between the political Zionists and Islam is being done by agent provocateurs working on behalf of the Illuminati, which is another word for the New World Order, which is also contained in the Bilderbergers, the Davos Group, the banking cabal, however you want to put it. It's the same group of insider elite families making decisions and using agent provocateurs. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. One name that gets batted around all the time. Oh, that evil George Soros. George Soros is an agent provocateur. He is not the one making the decisions, or we now find out that George Soros was being funded by USAID. What? Isn't this guy a billionaire? What are we doing funding George Soros? Hello. Well, that's what happened. And so here we go. So you can see that these agent provocateurs are out there. We know them by name because these are the names that the media gives us. This guy, that guy, that guy, that guy over there, this woman here, that guy there, that guy. These are the names that are agent provocateurs who are egging on the circumstances and calling out these things in order to inflame the situation. So there is a design. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, That doesn't include Indonesia, now does it? The Muslim Arabic world and the political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. Okay, so here we are, right? So here we are. We're starting to see that this is already taking place. We're getting to the point of economic exhaustion. We're getting to the point of moral exhaustion. We're getting to the point of spiritual exhaustion. We're not physically exhausted yet, but we soon will be when the food runs out. Now, David Bowen makes the point here, and a good point. The Romanovs were told they would be wiped out when they opposed the attempt to create the New World Order at the Congress of Vienna in 1830. That pledge would be realized with the Russian Revolution. Well, of course. And when you talk about that, David, remember that Nicholas II, he and his whole family were murdered by the communists. He was not the only one that was assassinated. His father, Alexander III, was also assassinated. And this is why the Church on Spilt Blood is standing in St. Petersburg today. It's the Church on Spilt Blood representing the spilled blood of Alexander III, who too was assassinated. And there were orders, the order that was inside the covert ops that were inside Russia at that time. You could call them the deep state of Central Europe, if you will. But there we have those same covert ops operating inside of the United States. Okay. All right, let's keep going. The war must be conducted in such a way that they wipe out each other. All right. Now, the question is this. When we see what's going on, there was a war that was fostered in between, it was fostered by the West to force Russia to fight a special military operation, if that's what you want to call it, in Ukraine. And this war was disastrous. This war was so disastrous for the West in particular. For instance, we know that Germany, France, Britain, Czechia, Poland, Romania, most of them have exhausted all of their military supplies, including their ammunition and their aircraft and their tanks and their artillery, putting them into Ukraine to allow Ukraine to wage this war with Russia. So this was essentially all the armament of NATO in Europe. Okay, so all of this happened. All right. Now, with all of that happening, you can see now that there has been an exhaustion. And then, of course, the Nord Stream pipeline, believed to have been blown up at the instruction of Joe Biden, confirmed by the Prime Minister of England within a minute and a half of the explosion, texting to the U.S. State Department, "It's done." That was from the flippin' Egypt, Liz Truss, who then shortly after that lost her office because she failed to recognize that she had all her emails and text messages up on the iCloud. And Kim.com had them in seconds. Well, hey, all right. So if that be said, so you can see that this was designed to exhaust economically the West, to exhaust economically, morally, and spiritually. And the spiritual and moral exhaustion of the West is what? Well, guess what? It's called DEI. DEI has spiritually and morally completely exhausted the West. Oh, you're standing up for traditional marriage. What kind of a weirdo are you? Really? On traditional marriage? It's like these people that are out there protesting the fact that they're mad about the fact that USAID stole 30 trillion from us and it can't keep going on. Hello? Come on, somebody wake up and smell the coffee. All right, now the last half of this letter, portion of this letter says, "We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm. A social cataclysm, with all of its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, the origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil." Now, I can't say that the kinds of things that they've tried to unleash, like Antifa and other anarchistic or nihilistic organizations, have they actually shown the savagery of atheism? Well, I don't know. But I think they could, particularly in light of the fact if we see the hard left communists, the communist atheists decide that they're going to go into full battle regalia as a result of what Trump and Elon Musk are doing. Then we could see this become a very formidable social cataclysm. then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity. Now, is the multitude becoming disillusioned with Christianity? This is a question for you. And I think the answer is yes. It is, in fact, being disillusioned with Christianity because Christianity is not teaching the truth of Scripture. It's teaching everything but the truth of Scripture. It is compromised in almost every possible direction. Not everybody, but in many places, it's compromised. Okay. Now, so with whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal. Now, you can imagine one of the things I've talked about is that in the event that Israel is completely destroyed, when the average Christian in America believes that those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse Israel will be cursed, if Israel is completely destroyed, what does that do to the central tenets of their faith, which are no longer predicated upon the gospel, but rather are predicated upon Noahide concepts? What happens to their faith? Where does it go? They'll be disillusioned. Their deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction. They'll be anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration. And here's where Albert Pike shows his color. We'll receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. You see, he's Luciferian. And he believes that this third world war will bring us to a Luciferian new world order. Brought finally out in the public view, this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. But we can see that Albert Pike, as a 33rd level Mason, as the supreme chief of the Supreme Council of the Masonic Order, as a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, sought in his heart to completely destroy Christianity and atheism in favor of Luciferianism. Okay. All right, that's a preliminary text. And remember that DJT, stood up. The only thing that mattered to him at all in the 2020 anarchy in DC was that the statute of Albert Pike be restored. Oh, here we go. Take a look at this picture. This is a picture of, well, I guess it's a stuffed animal. Picture of a stuffed animal that was on display at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. It's covered in $100 bills that have the picture of DJT on it, saying, "In Trump we trust. In Trump we trust." Enter the Lamb with two horns. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his authority. Now, I got to tell you, this is something that I didn't see before, but I'm seeing it now. Okay. Because when we look at where I believe the beast is going to lie, it has to do with the fact that it was not a leopard, but it was like unto a leopard. And he did not have the feet of the bear. They were as the feet of the bear. And it wasn't the mouth of a lion, but rather as the mouth of the lion. Now, this is interesting because this indicates that it's not something with the stripes of a leopard, the feet of a bear, and the mouth of a lion, but something that is like that. In other words, it's artificial. See, I'm going to describe the beast who is like Donald Trump, acts as the president, and has hair that looks like Donald Trump's hairdo. Well, that tells you something, that it's not Trump. So the point I'm making here is that this is, in fact, something artificial. In other words, it's not the real thing. It is artificial. Okay. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death. Now, this is important. It has 7 heads, but one of the heads was wounded to death. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after that beast. Now, is it possible that this 7th head is, in fact, Judaism, which was wounded to death and was healed? And they worshiped after the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who was able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things. So the beast before this did not have the ability to speak. But now they've given him a mouth, and now the beast can speak. And the beast is going to speak great things and blasphemies. And the power was given unto him to continue for 42 months. All right, well, 42 months is interesting. Why? Where else do we see 42 months? And there was given me a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of Elohim, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court, which is without the temple, leave it out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the other nations, and the holy simple city shall they tread under foot for 42 months. Okay, well, what's the holy city? And who's going to do the treading? Leave out the outer court. That which is without the temple, leave it out. Don't measure it. It's profane. Leave it out. We're only interested in measuring the temple of Elohim and the altar and them that worship therein. Those who are not inside the temple and worshiping therein are going to be trampled by the other nations for 42 months. Okay. All right. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Elohim, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the Kodashim and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. Well, this is what I'm saying. If the beast is in fact AGI, right, we could look and say, hey, gee, look, we think that it's going to be a human being. But what if it isn't? What if it's AGI? It looks like this. It has this. It has a mouth, and it's got a mouth that is roaring like a lion. It's got the feet like a bear. It's running around like it's pretty powerful. It's got stripes like a leopard. It looks like the real thing, but it isn't. It isn't. It's just powerful. Now, in its power, is it possible for AGI to have the power? Is it given under AGI? I'm going to ask you the question right now. You guys can answer me the question. Is it given unto AGI to have the power over all kindreds, tongues, and nations? Yes. Every nation on earth is running as fast as it can to give its governance to AGI. And one has to distinguish between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is the stuff that functions on the ground. Now, when we talk about this, the kinds of things they're talking about putting into the hands of AGI right now, right? I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again here. The technology that is being developed for future warfare includes submarine drones, fighter aircraft drones, missile drones, bomber drones, helicopter drones, all of these things, tanks in drones, automatic machine gun nests in drones, cyborgs that will be actual troops on the ground, armed dogs, for heaven's sakes, that have their backs open up with full missile display. And so you can see drones, clones, cyborgs, This is where the whole battle is going. And these are quite advanced, but they're also talking about air traffic control. They're talking about self-driving cars. They're talking about self-driving trucks. They're talking about self-driving aircraft. They're talking about kiosks replacing the average clerk. They're going to be replacing the average clerk this year. I mean, that's coming very, very quickly. As one guy put it, it'll be 100,000 this year, 1 million next year, 10 million the year after. Every employee is going to be replaced. And there is no one that is standing in the way saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe, hold on here. No, there's nobody saying that. Every country on earth is going as fast as they can to be the country that implements the most AGI first. Now, one has to ask themselves the question, what is behind AGI? What is the God behind AGI? And I use the word God, not Elohim, not Yahweh. What is the idol? What is the being behind AGI? What is it? Because this is the dragon. This is the dragon. Okay. All that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the Sefer of the life's lamb of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. That is to say, if your name is not written in the Sefer of the life of the Lamb, you're going to look at AGI and say, this stuff is the cat's meow. Oh, look, it can cure cancer. Oh, look, I'm just, as Elon Musk said, without the neural chip, I'm just a house cat. I'm not looking forward to being a house cat. I'm sorry. You can bring in all your AGI as much as you want and do all your computing as much as you want. Give me a good folk song in, G major. I'll take it. I'll take a good folk song on the guitar, sitting around the campfire at night. That doesn't make me a house cat. Okay. But the reason I'm telling you guys this, I'm giving this broadcast tonight because of the same reason that I went public in August of 2020, warning you about what was coming. I was doing a live radio broadcast in a car, traveling with my good friend Cheryl Rowe, who's just died here this week, and may Yah bless her in every way. And Paul Barry. We were driving, coming back from Canterbury to London. We're crossing the Thames River. I'm doing a live broadcast in the States. And the live broadcast is when I warn people, don't get near the nanobot spike protein untested formula. And you might remember that I mentioned that this had the components of the mark. Oh, no, it's just a precursor. This isn't the mark. This is just a precursor. Oh, really? And how are those nanobots doing now in your system? And how are those effects of that doing for you? Yeah, you're already tied into AGI. You're already tied. People can walk by you and get your barcode by scanning your arm. Or so it is said. And again, this is for entertainment purposes only, right? Okay. So the point being is this, and I want to make this point here very clearly before we leave this slide. Okay. All power was given him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. Every nation on earth is going to empower the beast, which is AGI. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. They're going to worship this beast, except those whose names are written in the Sefer of the Lamb, the Sefer of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. Keep that in mind, okay? All right. If any man has an ear, let him hear. Okay, I'm telling you, if you got an ear, hear it. If you have an ear, hear it. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Don't become a volunteer for the system. You think you're doing somebody a favor by putting somebody in Guantanamo Bay that you don't like. You think you're doing somebody a favor by killing some Palestinian in a tunnel in Gaza. Don't be that person. Enter the Lamb. Enter the Lamb. This is why I have this visual on this screen. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. And he spoke as a dragon. and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Now, when you're talking about the first beast, he's talking about worshiping that head of the first beast that had the deadly head wound. Remember, there were 7 heads. One of them had the deadly head wound, and it's been healed. And this lamb or this goat that has 2 horns, a lamb that has 2 horns, that has 2 horns like a lamb but speaks like a dragon, causes the whole earth to worship the head that had the deadly head wound but was healed. And he does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. You might recall a certain thing called Space Force. You might recall things that are being labeled as DEW, directed energy weapons. Those are low-powered fire starters. They are not as powerful as some of the lasers that they have, although you might recall that there were visual images, and I'm not saying that they were not Photoshopped, they might have been, but there were visual images that I saw of lasers at Lahaina, lasers Paradise Valley, lasers in Pacific Palisades. You weigh it. You weigh it. But we all know the story about the blue roof. Okay. So fire is coming down from heaven, and it's going to get more intense. Fire is going to come down from heaven. He does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of these miracles which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, they should make an image to the beast. They should make an image to the beast. Now, this image to the beast, I think it's just my opinion now, but I think the image to the beast is, in fact, going to be a cryptocurrency. It's going to be a cryptocurrency. This is, again, my opinion, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Oh, okay. So the image of this beast is going to be something that is going to be the image of that which was wounded by the sword and came back. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Oh. Now, you might recall, and I'll just mention this, that the New Testament has already been criminalized in one jurisdiction in the United States. Arguably, it could be argued, full faith and credit, that once it's criminalized in one state, you have to give full faith and credit to that in all 49 others, unless you're Barack Obama, in which case you have to give credit in all 52 others. But those of us who know there's 50 states know that South Dakota is the state that has criminalized the New Testament, because the New Testament contains, in most English-speaking Bibles, the phrase that the Jews killed Jesus. That is described as an anti-Semitic hate speech by the people giving the definition to the law in South Dakota. Therefore, the New Testament in its form is criminal hate speech in South Dakota. Now, I don't know when you criminalize it, maybe when you preach it in a church, maybe when you publish it online, maybe when you speak it, maybe when you put it in a Facebook post. I don't know. I suspect you have to make it actionable, but at some point, if you reiterate that, guess what? You're engaged in hate speech. That very same law that was passed and signed into law by Kristi Noem, now the head of Homeland Security, has been passed by the United States House of Representatives under the tutelage of Mike Johnson. And it was sent on to the Senate. The Senate tried to add it to a National Defense Authorization Act, and it was rejected. Mike Johnson told them if they did that, he would vote down the bill. He said, you need to pass it in wholesale form on its own. The Senate has not done it yet. But when the Senate does it, will Trump sign it? If Trump signs it, then the New Testament becomes hate speech as a matter of federal law. Now, if the image of the beast is in fact Israel. And the image of the beast begins to speak, and any of those who do not worship Israel should be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. In other words, prove that you worship. Prove that you worship. That no man might buy or sell save that he had that mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. One wonders what that mark could look like. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. Don't just simply restate it or put a gematria on there. Calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is chi stigma. Okay, we've talked about this before, but basically what you see is if you take 600 and you multiply it by 60 and you multiply it by 6, you get 216,000. If you take a triple helix DNA that has 72,000 genes in the downward DNA, 72,000 genes in the upward DNA, and the third helix in the messenger RNA, which must necessarily contain the same number of genes, well, we get to 216,000. And when we're talking about this 216,000, this is the number of the genetic makeup of a man. As compared to this man here, whose genetic number is 144,000. Okay, now with all that being said, remember that this particular presentation is for entertainment purposes only, and it's my humble opinion. I'm not here to give you medical advice, legal advice, financial advice, or anything else. I'm just basically trying to share with you what I find in the scripture. So with that being said, let's take some questions if you have some questions, because I believe that I have completed my presentation. Yes, I'm correct. I have, yes. Okay. And quite frankly, I was hoping to have a robust discussion on this rather than just me pontificating, as I usually do. But I want to thank you guys for joining me on this channel. And I want to say this, there's been a lot of discussion, okay? Like, let's talk about, for just a minute, I want to talk about some of the history of Israel, because there is a lot of disinformation. Okay, one bit of disinformation is the fact that there is a claim that the Palestinians are the Philistines. And I think this is absolutely unjustified. It's an unjustifiable conclusion. In fact, it really has no basis in reality whatsoever. Because you can see that when you look at that land, when you look at that area, when you go back and you begin to see that there was a great deal of transition that took place. For instance, you can read in Daniel and you can see part of that transition. But the whole idea that at one time Egypt under Joseph had claimed all of that land because everybody had to come in and get wheat. And so that was part of Egypt. And in fact, even in the book of Revelation, it identifies the city where Mashiach was crucified as Sodom and Egypt. It was in Egypt. Okay. Now, in addition to that, we know that the Assyrians conquered everything except Jerusalem, and they moved a lot of people into the area. This is, what took place when they moved the 10 tribes out. They moved their own people in. And in addition to that, so after the Assyrians did this, the Babylonians conquered the place, took the Jews away, and only 45,000 returned. And when they returned, they didn't return to the Philistines. They returned to a different group of tribes that were there. And remember that the vast majority of the tribes in that land were Canaanites, not Philistines. Philistines were coast dwellers. So the Philistines basically disappear from the record entirely. By the time you get to the Maccabees, there's no discussion of the Philistines, because what you're dealing with the Maccabees is you're dealing with primarily the Edomite Empire, and Idumea is this area that extended from Mount Seir all the way to the coasts of Egypt, namely a town called Sukkot that is near the Sinai. That from the Sinai all the way to Mount Seir was actually Idumea, not Palestina. The Palestinians could not possibly exist before Rome put the name Palestine on the place. And when that happened, the so-called Palestinians, calling them Palestinians, I think is a real misnomer. But again, this was kind of an assignment of the name that took place really from Rome and post-Rome and the Crusaders warring against the Muslims over control of this area. And so when you talk about this, the people that they're calling Palestinians, these are a group of people that are primarily of Egyptian ethnicity or Arab ethnicity. And so they are not Palestinian in any respect. Now, even with the Arab ethnicity, remember that if you accept the fact that the tribes were there, and we do think, for instance, that the Yemenis are most assuredly the tribe of Shimon in Israel, and we think there may be other tribes there as well. But if you go back and you look at the history of the foundation of Islam, when you read the story of Muhammad, he was dealing with these Jews that were in Mecca and Medina. They were Jews in Mecca and Medina. And this is who, it's said that he beheaded 600 Jews in one day. And all of these were Jews in the Mecca and Medina area. So where did these Jews go? And how many of them converted to Islam to avoid the point of the Islamic sword? So the chances that the Palestinians are actually of the tribe of Israel are really pretty high. And in fact, there's been some genetic work that indicates that's the case. Also, the Druze who live in that area may also be of the house of Yasharel. But to say they're Philistines is, absurd. And the idea that the land was given to the Jews is a very interesting concept, because that assumes that you can prove that that bit of turf right there, formerly of the Ottoman Empire, was in fact of the Holy Land, which I don't think you can. And I think actually the Holy Land is in a different place altogether. David's palace was in a different place. Solomon's temple was in a different place. The pool of Shiloh was in a different place. Mount of Olives is in a different place. Mount Zion is in a different place. Mount Moriah is in a different place. None of that is in that place. That place is pseudo-Israel. And so because of that, to say that all of a sudden the Jews have a right to that land ignores the fact that there were people living there for almost 2,000 years before you decided to say these Central Europeans have a right to your land. And this is what people ignore, and it's ridiculous to think that. So, all right, so let's see. So Debbie Johnson asked the question. Well, first of all, let me deal with Pamela Crabtree, black goo and technology. Now, this is interesting stuff. I know Yana Ben Noon did a discussion on this with an interesting scientist who said there was intelligence found in the black goo. I think that's very, very possible. And in fact, there's lots of things that we don't understand about the Earth, and many, many things we don't understand about the Earth. And we're going to have to kind of live with the fact that we don't understand them. Okay. And Debbie Johnson asked, what are my thoughts about time being shortened? Yeah, time being shortened is possible, and it's possible that it may be shortened by a full year, Debbie. I think we've got a 3.5-year period ahead of us here. Myself, I'm actually looking for the two witnesses. You might be saying, well, this is wrong. You're crazy. It's not going to come for another whatever. But I'm personally looking for the two witnesses. There are people who are saying that the war between Israel and Iran, which is going to launch this war that Albert Pike envisions, because when Israel and Iran go at it, both of them are going to be completely destroyed. And Israel may think it's going to avoid destruction. It is not. And I don't think Netanyahu cares if Israel is destroyed. It doesn't seem to bother him at all when Houthi hypersonics come into Tel Aviv. But uh, or they suppress all the news on that. But what's going to take place when Israel decides to bomb Iran's nuclear program, that Iran is going to respond with the equivalent of the Oreshnik, which is going to be a hypersonic missile that is going to be carrying an impact like a nuclear weapon, but without any radioactive cloud. And there's going to be maybe 1,000 of those coming into Israel, and which Israel cannot stop. So this means that there's going to be a massive destruction that comes to Israel should they launch against Iran. Now, there's B-52s that have been moved into the UK right now. And the B-52s, I think there is a chance that Donald Trump intends to carpet bomb Iran. And I don't know that for sure, but he's told Iran that, look, you try to assassinate me, we're going to bomb you into oblivion and bomb you off the map. I think nuke them off the map. It was something expression like this. And so there's a very good chance that Trump's opinion about Iran is one that says, let's bomb them off the map. And again, I think he is ignoring how well armed Iran is. And I think the Israelis have some idea how well armed it is, but that's not going to stop them because they have full permission to engage in this war. And so you can see the agent provocateurs of the Illuminati, of the New World Order, of the World Economic Forum, of the Davos Group, of the Bilderberger Group, of the banking cabal. They're all in place saying we're going to do this irrespective of the public opinion, irrespective of its logic, irrespective of its rationale. We're just going to do it. So with that being said, most of the people are projecting that this is going to go down in April. Well, if it starts on March 28th and it starts on the beginning of the year, the year we believe to be the first year of the 121st Jubilee. Now, a lot of people saying, oh, that's not right. We already determined a different Jubilee and on and on. Well, okay, that's all right. That's fine. If you don't believe this is 121st Jubilee, well, then plant a garden, don't let me get in your way. Uh, I'm just saying that, my reckoning is that this all looks like it's all in the same place. And in this same place, I think we've concluded the Revelation 12 period. We saw the 7-year period beginning back in 2017, running through 2024. Right after 2024, we wrap up that 7-year period. Then we go into the election, and now we're moving into this transition period. This is this great pause in heaven, waiting for Satan to make his move. And now we've had the pause, and the pause is coming to an end. In my opinion, again, this is my opinion. I'm not a prophet. I'm just telling you my opinion. And in my opinion, I think we're going to see some absolutely phenomenal events at the highest level, that you're going to see the beast system imposed, where AGI is going to be implemented in the government as fast as it possibly can. This Sam Altman has just been given $5 billion to build the largest computer ever seen by anybody ever. It's going to get built, and it's going to be massively quick, and it's going to be sentient. It's going to have singularity. It's going to be self-aware, and it is going to begin to create at a massively fast level, tens of thousands of times faster than a human being can think. So as a consequence, AGI is going to get here a lot quicker than what you might imagine. And so we're going into the world of the AGI controlling everything in every country on earth. They're already doing it. Oh, we need to have biometric scan, and we need to have digital ID, or we need to have a cryptocurrency, or we need to have a social credit score, or we need to engage you on your environmental, social, and governance score. We need to have all of this stuff. All of this stuff is on the table right now. It's all here. It's all right here. It just is. And it's being implemented, not at warp speed, but at ludicrous speed. At ludicrous speed. So that is almost assuredly coming. And then here we have the goat, the lamb with two horns, who speaks like a dragon, is telling you that you must worship that head that was wounded and yet is healed. That the head that everybody thought was wounded to death in World War II is healed and is now back in the nation of Israel. And if you don't worship there, if you don't worship that, then you're going to be killed. Okay, so the time being shortened is going to be this time period between 2028 and 2031. That's only a 2-year period, not a 3-year period. That's all I'm going to say about it, Debbie. 2-year period, not a 3-year period. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so Chuck Deuce says, even if they were, it changes nothing. They still live where they should. If Islam wasn't the way it was, then everything would be fine. Well, yeah, I mean, look, Islam is definitely has its issues. However, Islam, I no longer accept the kind of terrorist moniker that George W. Bush sold me in 2001. We got to have a war on terror, and they're all Muslim. And having met many Muslims, the average Muslim is a Muslim because their parents were Muslim, right? The radical jihadists, turns out all of them were funded by USAID. Hey, what? Oh yeah, Al-Nusra, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. We had a $10 million bounty on Giuliani, who's heading up Syria now. Oh, turns out he was on our payroll. And guess what? He was in tents that said USAID on him. He was getting weapons from USAID. And now he's the leader of Syria. And hey, well, since you're the leader of Syria, there goes the bounty. There goes the $10 million bounty. Hey, when can we invite you to the White House? Right? Make sure you take a bath. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. All right. So Chris asks, Dr. P, do you think that we will be gathered into a Goshen area before the complete rollout of the CBDC taking effect, where we can no longer buy and sell? Now, Chris, I used to think that, and I don't think that anymore. What I think now is that I think we need to come out of her. We need to come out of the system. Now, what that means is this: you're not going to have a choice. When the mark comes, you either take the mark or you don't. If you don't take the mark, then you're out of the system. Now, I think when it says you take the mark, the name, or its number, the name means that you're employed. You've got the link in your brain. You got the chip in you. Okay, you got the chip in you. So you've taken the name, right? You've got that. The number is, like, as I mentioned to you before, you're going to be a 216er, not a 144. And then, of course, taking the mark is, I also explained to you what that was too. 6 on the outside, 6 on the inside, 6 in the middle, right? Okay. And so this is what's going to happen. And so, no, I don't think we're going to be gathered into a Goshen. Where you're going to be is you're going to be in a situation where you're just going to have to make the decision that you don't love life unto death, right? It's just a decision you're going to have to make. And then you live as you let your trust in Yah, what Yah is going to do, right? The Church of Philadelphia, this calamity will pass over you when it comes. It will pass over you. Trust and obey. Okay. Okay, my opinion on all these so-called ancient experts as of late. Yeah, well, that's a very good question, James. I'll tell you, because the so-called ancient experts, I think it's kind of interesting because a lot of people are coming out and they're passing on the narrative that has been given to us by churchianity. And they're passing on the narrative that the Knights Templar, who were notorious liars, had a narrative they had created in order to allow them to do their crusade thing and create banking and all of that. All of that created banking. And all of that stuff was, again, designed to further the control of Constantine, who was a sun worshiper who had created a melting pot of religions into a single pot called Roman Christianity. And they did everything they possibly could to further that at the behest of Irenaeus, to use the point of the sword to force that doctrine down the throats of everyone in Europe. I talked about this a little bit in one of the classes this week, talking about Pope Boniface VIII. Boniface VIII, who issued an edict called the Unum Sanctum, on a papal bull, which was human flesh taken from a child sacrifice, claiming that he was the superior authority in the world and that the whole impetus for every political leader on earth was to convert everybody else under his control. The Unum Sanctum. Yeah. And the problem is that the narrative that has been created by Rome is a disinformation narrative for the most part, not all of it. I mean, how can you deny a Roman aqueduct or a Roman road, right? You can't. But you can certainly deny the Roman narrative, because the Roman narrative was changed in order to enhance Rome, to make Rome the central city, to make Rome the eternal city, to make Rome's doctrine central, that they might control the whole of the earth under the Unum Sanctum. And the reality is much, much different. The reality of the Old Testament, where it was created and all this, completely different than the narrative we have been given by churchianity. It's a narrative that is pop culture. It's pop culture, pop understanding, and it does not withstand close scrutiny. That's my opinion. Okay. All right. Okay, the followers of Yah also carry a marker sign in their hands and forehead by keeping the Pesach. Yeah, there it is, John. Keeping the Pesach and keeping Shabbat, right? This is the seal of Yah, is keeping Shabbat. Keeping the Pesach is also your mark, right? All right, let's see. Uh, so Debbie says, let's see. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, wait a minute. Let me come back, catch up on these questions here. I got to, this thing jumped on me here. Okay. Okay, on the two witnesses. Now, so let's see here. So Virginia asks, who do you think the two witnesses will be? All right. Now, the two witnesses I think are coming, and uh, the two witnesses that are coming, I think the two witnesses are two things: the word of Elohim and the testimony of Mashiach, which is the spirit of prophecy. This is the bread and the wine. These are the two witnesses. And these are the two true things, the word of Elohim and the testimony of Mashiach. And this is what is going to witness against the earth. And they are going to try to kill it, but they're not going to be able to kill it. Okay. All right, let's see here. Just a minute. I got it going up and trying to catch all these questions that I missed because I scrolled down just a little bit and away it went. Okay, let's see. All right, here we go. All right. So Debbie asked my thoughts on society being dumbed down. Could the snake bite be affecting that? Absolutely. There has been a bit of some tests and some analyses have shown that one aspect of certain batches were designed to eliminate the God gene, is how they put it, to eliminate the God gene. And in eliminating the God gene, what they did was people who had there were testimony that said I could no longer feel, I was no longer connected. And I think, there are people, I have a few friends, Scott Bennett was one of them, who believed that there was diminished rationale among those who had been severely bitten by the snake. There was diminished rationale. And so do I think that I think all of society is being dumbed down. It's not just from the snake bite. Look, when you have a smart phone in your hand, you stop thinking. The phone does the thinking. And if you think people are dumb right now, wait until you're 100% dependent on Alexa or 100% dependent on Siri or 100% dependent on whatever it is that you're using. I can't think at all. Where's my shoes? Where are my glasses? Where's my cell phone? You scream it out in the house and your cell phone speaks back to you. I'm over here because your cell phone is that smart, right? Your cell phone is telling you need to buy the following groceries. Your refrigerator has already reported to me that you're out of ketchup and you've only got a little bit of milk left. One egg isn't going to cut it for breakfast in the morning. You need to get to the store, right? Your car, and how you get these diagnostic reports now. I don't know if you guys get these reports from your car, but we get these reports by email. Oh, we've looked at the diagnostics on your car, and your right front tire is showing a little low on air. Hey, you need an oil change, right? This is the kind of stuff I don't have to think about it. My smart device is going to tell me when to get an oil change, and in the very near future, it'll just drive my car down there and get the oil change. Won't even have to think about me getting in the car, right? So how dumb do you think people are going to be when we get to this point? I mean, already we can't remember phone numbers, and most of us can't travel into a city without the GPS on, right? Can't drive without the GPS on. All kinds of stuff that we used to be able to do all the time, we can't do anymore. What are you going to do when the AI is doing all the thinking for you? All of it. It's doing all of the thinking for you. And there are people that are allowing AI to do it. Oh, let AI write a letter for me. Let AI construct my resume. Let AI do this. Let AI do that. Okay, Chat GPT, go for it, right? Okay, so Karen asked the question, should we partake in communion? Okay, now, in this case, Karen, I can tell you that participating in the bread and the cup is one thing. Okay, the bread and the cup celebration among believers is celebrating the word of Elohim, which is the bread, and the cup celebrates the testimony of Mashiach, which is the wine. Going into the Catholic Church and engaging in transubstantiation is a different issue altogether. when they ask you, they're handing you the wafer and they say, this is the body of Christ. They say that to you, and you confirm that you're going to eat that flesh. That's a completely different issue. Okay. Completely different issue. All right. Let's see. Bill Luce asks, could the AC be a chimera with a triple helix or with different parts of the beast through genetics for entertainment only? Yeah. I mean, that's possible when you talk about the chimera, bear, leopard, lion. That also kind of qualifies as a hyena too, which may also be a chimera while you're talking about it. So that is a possibility. That's a possibility, Bill, that we could see some kind of a chimera. But I think personally, what I think the beast is artificial. It's like a bear. It's got the mouth of a lion. It's going to roar. It's got the feet of a bear. It's going to trample over and claw. It's got the stripes of a leopard. It's going to be quick. It's going to be fast. It's going to look elusive. But it's like that. It's not. It doesn't have it. It's like that. So I mean, I think it's artificial. Okay, Debbie Johnson asked, do you have thoughts on the Nephilim returning? Well, I think the Nephilim, when you're talking about the fallen watchers have never gone away. Some fell, some fell out of heaven, but they haven't necessarily occupied earth. Genesis 6:4 says they were here before the flood and after, and after. So now, in terms of the 70 generations of the disembodied spirits, the disembodied rule code, it says in Enoch chapter 10, it says that the spirits of the Nephilim, that is to say, the children of the fallen watchers, will be trapped in the earth for 70 generations, and then they will be unleashed. Well, you might say, well, what's a generation? Is it 40 years? Is it 70 years? Is it 120 years? What's a generation? You don't have to ask that question at all. Just count the generations in Luke chapter 3, beginning in verse 30. You count from Mashiach and you go back 70 and it takes you right to Enoch, not Adam. That's the 70 generations, and the demons were released then. So they're still here. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Bertie Bear. Appreciate that approach. Okay, so Dr. P, talk about the claims that Pike's letter was a hoax displayed in the British Museum in the 20s. Okay, yeah. And the British Museum, listen, I got to tell you something about the British Museum, okay? If you want to talk about political shenanigans, the political shenanigans are there. But even assuming it was a hoax and it was displayed in the British Museum in the 1920s, and believe me, they're trying to scrub it from the internet right now because they don't want you to see this prediction. But when you see that it was put in the 20s, that would be immediately after World War I and before World War II, long before the rise of communism. Okay, so this is something to think about. Oh, and again, when you're talking about the hoax of this, that, and the other thing, all I can tell you is that I've seen the letter for more than 40 years, and it had been around for a long time. So, is it a hoax? Maybe. I mean, who knows anymore what a hoax is and what isn't, right? For instance, there's a discussion right now going on online that is claimed to be a hoax, that Caterpillar is going to be introducing a 4-wheel drive truck with a Caterpillar diesel under the hood, and they're going to want 40 grand for it. Now, let me tell you, that truck hits the market at a price point of 40 grand. I'm going to have that truck. A Caterpillar with a Cat diesel? Oh, yeah. That's my rig. Yeah, you bet. But they're saying that all that advertisement and discussion is a hoax. Okay, well, all right. Let's see. Yeah, so Chad Hudson says a Neuralink will cost you a little more than a high-end cell phone. Isn't that convenient? Okay, wait a minute, Chad. I got to get that right. Isn't that convenient? Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, really, no kidding. John Shuckle says the Earth will return to a 360-day calendar. That's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. I saw, again, a scientific report about the pole shift that has taken place, and it's going to move another 25 miles this year. And this is already given us a 6-degree shift in the pole. Okay. Virginia McCabe says, who do I think the two witnesses will be? I think it's the word of Elohim and the testimony of Mashiach. Okay. Matt says it's Hanok and Eliyahu. All right. Let's see. What else do we have? Yeah. And again, the two witnesses will prophesy for 203 score days, 1,203 score days, 1,260 days. Okay. My thoughts on one of the witnesses being the word, it's like a time capsule. It is a time capsule. They can completely destroy 100% of the word, and the word will be republished in the next generation. Okay. Do the two witnesses come before the AC and the abomination of desolation? No. And in fact, when you talk about the AC, remember, see, this is why I don't like the term the AC, because people are looking for Nikolai of Carpathia, to come out and say, and proclaim himself to be God in the third temple that's going to be built on the Temple Mount. And I disagree with all of that eschatology entirely. I disagree with that entirely. The prophecies that you have is that there are many antichrists. Anyone who denies that Mashiach came in the flesh is antichrist. Okay, that's First John and Third John. But when you're talking about the prophetic people coming at the end times, you're talking about the man of lawlessness, the son of sin, the son of perdition, the man of sin. You're talking about the white horse. You're talking about the black horse, the red horse. You're talking about the beast that rises out of the sea. You're talking about the beast that rises out of the earth. These are the things that are here, and they're here now. So when you talk about the abomination of desolation, I think the abomination of desolation, in my humble opinion, is the animal sacrifice. That's what I think it is, the animal sacrifice. And when they do the animal sacrifice again, which that would probably be on Pesach of this upcoming year, the question is, will they establish this place that will allow them to do an animal sacrifice in Israel? That's a question. Okay, let's see what else we have. Okay, the calm before the storm. Yes, indeed. That's exactly where we are, Pauline, in the calm before the storm. Okay, and James Hilly says, definitely speeding up. 555 says, yeah, I said, many are not going to make it. I pray you all have faith to endure to the end. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. We have to pray to endure to the end. That's going to be the whole strength of it. Okay. So Bertie Bear asked the question, can you speak on Trump's statement, the golden age? Yeah, the golden age is a very interesting, it's a very interesting provocation, isn't it? The golden age, the golden age. We're going to have the golden age. Can you tell me how long it's going to last? 42 months. Well, give me that in a number of days, would you? Yeah, sure. 1,203 score days. 42 months. That's how long the golden age will last. Yeah. The golden age is the belief that Trump believes that he's going to make America great by doing things that made America great in the past, imposing tariffs, getting rid of the income tax, cutting out all this ridiculous top-down bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy that he's cutting out right now is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And these people have stolen $30 trillion. 30 trillion. Oh, yeah, I've got a pet program. We need to study, the wheels are going to come off the bus if they stop going round and round, right? The stupidity of what's been going on, and there's been no management, nobody would dare to say a word because they were all eating from the same trough. When you're all feeding from the same trough, who's going to say, hey, somebody needs to shut off the slop? Nobody, until you get to Trump. And Trump said, we're going to shut off the slop. Okay, well, hallelujah. So will that create a golden age? The best laid plans of mice and men. I've talked about this too. I did a radio program on RFA called Unintended Consequences. And here's the thing is that Trump had so much momentum and so many things going. His domestic policies were like on target. RFK Jr. being appointed, I think is a very good thing. I think Tulsi Gabbard being appointed is a very good thing. And so he's moving in the right direction. He's trying to remasculinize the U.S. military. He's getting rid of these, mandatory protocols. He's completely blowing out the DEI protocol and defunding it all the way around. He's getting rid of all the propaganda machines, including all the funding from USAID, where they were paying all of these broadcasters to censor me and censor you and to take your video down. Oh, I'm sorry. You violated our standards. Strike one. Strike two. Oh, we have to take you down. We have to censor you. Censor, censor, censor. And who told them to censor me? Some USAID agent paying to censor speech that they didn't like. Now, you want my opinion, cut all the funding and then go back and find out everybody that did it. And then, hey, how about some damages from you for, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242 conspiring to deprive me of my First Amendment rights? How about that? All right. Anyway, so Trump is doing a lot right. But I can tell you, all the great things that he's done and all the great things where he's going, all those things that he's doing were all correct until he got to Gaza. And once he got to Gaza, he has made an error that is going to literally take his entire golden age apart. It's going to take the golden age apart. And because it's going to take the golden age apart, they're going to double down and they're going to triple down. And that doubling and tripling down is going to be faster and bigger application of AGI and a very strong criminal pursuit of those people that are engaged in anti-Semitism. Now, personally, I'm pro-Semite. I think the Semites should have a land and a nation state in the Levant. I think all Semites should have a land and a nation there. And I favor all Semites. I don't like to discriminate between one Semite or the other. I think all Semitic people deserve a homeland and deserve a nation state. Okay. All right, let's see here. When I talk to Dartmouth, they can't tell you the ingredient. Yeah, well, I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, they are openly saying, this is 555 TV is saying it. They are openly saying that all governance will be handed over to AGI. That's exactly right, 555 TV. They're all saying, there's nobody that's disagreeing with that. They're all saying that. We're going to turn all of our governance over to AGI, and the sooner the better. Okay. Okay, so Ron Wyatt gave an account of a visitation with an angel that said he was traveling from South Africa to the New Jerusalem. You know, I haven't seen that account, Stephen, so I don't want to comment on it. Yeah. Ludicrous speed. Yeah, you got it, David. It's from Spaceballs. I'll give Mel Brooks credit for that one. Okay. 3 days of darkness, greater exodus, and Abaddon. A bad dawn. Yeah. Well, Abaddon, I think the opening of the abyss is near. It's very near. Now, I think we're going to be seeing some things here. I mean, let me just throw something out that you guys have not talked about here tonight. Nobody's raised it in a question, which is the issue of the earthquake swarms that are happening around Santorini in the Aegean Sea. This is a basin-wide event. And should this have an eruption that was the equivalent of the last time that volcano erupted, there will be a basin-wide event. That is to say, there will be a tsunami that encompasses virtually all of the Eastern Mediterranean and could have far reaches as far as Libya and Sicily and even Sardinia. So, you know, you're looking at, this is going to be a basin-wide event, depending on how big it is, all right? So just keep that in mind. I haven't raised that issue before, but you know, there's more volcanoes going off right now than you could possibly imagine. They're blowing up in Hawaii and in Japan and Iceland. They're blowing up in Russia. They're blowing up in Italy. You know, down in Mount Etna's going for it again. So you know, things, and we may have one up here, Mount Spur. And now, if Mount Spur erupts, this will be very interesting because when Spur erupts, Spur is not a lava volcano; it's an ash volcano. So when it blows up, it, you know, puts a huge pyroclastic cloud out there. And the last time it blew up, which was in 1992, it covered the city of Anchorage with about 5 inches of ash. And it also covers the Matsu Valley with ash. And it covers Kenai, right? And the whole, you know, most of the Kenai Peninsula with ash. And this could be 3, 4, 5 inches of ash, depending on how big the eruption is. And that is that is on the table. I mean, Mount Spurs, they're giving it a 50-50 chance of an eruption. Keep in mind that we have 6 volcanoes here that are active, that are right in a row. I mean, there's Mount Spur, which erupted in 92. There's Mount Redoubt, which erupted in 88. There's Mount Iliamna, which hasn't erupted in this century, but is still active. There's Mount St. Augustine, which erupted in 86. And then there is a Mount, what is the name of it? Mount Douglas. There's Mount Douglas. And then you get to Katmai and the event called Nova Rupta. And Nova Rupta, by the way, is showing signs of moving towards eruption. When Nova Rupta erupted in 1907, it was the largest volcanic eruption in North American history, recorded history. It created 5 days of darkness over the city of Kodiak. They couldn't see a thing. And now maybe that's what we're going to see with the 3 days of darkness. Okay. All right. And let's see. Okay, so Debbie asked me the question, what are my thoughts on the planes falling out of the air and weather events and tsunamis and earthquakes? Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get to that, Rob Barabanoff. Give me 1 second. So I'm going to say this. I covered the air events in when they happen on RFA. My understanding, and again, this is my opinion, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so I'm just kind of reiterating facts. I'm not saying that these are hardcore facts. I'm just kind of reiterating what I've heard. The helicopter was apparently staffed by 4 people. When the wreck first happened, within the hour, they said they had rescued 4 military personnel from that helicopter, and then the story was buried. And the helicopter, if you look at the radar route, appears to be making a dead on for the American Airlines plane that was coming into Reagan National from the south, and it was in ineligible airspace. In other words, it was not supposed to be above 200 feet, and it was at 400 feet, and it seemed to be making a beeline for the plane. So I believe that it was intentional. I believe it was an intentional act. This is my opinion. I'm not saying it's proven, just giving you my opinion. I think it was intentional, and I think the Black Hawk was being controlled by AI. And I think when the crew recognized that the Black Hawk was being controlled by AI and that they could not control the aircraft, they bailed. Now, who controlled it? We don't know. But I think the F-35s, there was an F-35 that went down at Eielson Air Force Base and an F-35 that went down in San Diego Bay recently. Now, this may be testing, and they may be testing because one of the great deficits in the F-35 is that it is subject to a tactical EMP that Russia has. In other words, we can't use the F-35 against Russia in Ukraine, and Vladimir Zelensky knows it. That's why he requested F-16s because the Russians just hit a switch and the plane, it kills all the systems on the jet and down it goes. So they may have been testing a new device that was going to be sufficient to keep that tactical EMP from affecting the F-35. They hit it with the device. It didn't work, and down came the planes. In both cases, one in Eielson and one in San Diego. So this may be an AI test event that's going on to try to test some kind of a system that is going to be anti-EMP. The Learjet that went down in Pennsylvania, I think now, some people have speculated that that wasn't a jet, but rather that was a missile because of the trajectory of the jet as it came down and the speed at which it came down. That's possible, although I can tell you that if the jet was full speed, let's say the jet's full speed, comes off the runway. So you come off the runway, let's say 200 miles an hour. By the time you're as far up off the ground as he was, he's maybe at 300 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, the pilot dies suddenly. Now, if the pilot dies suddenly, if that happens, the pilot collapses over the top of the stick, right? Pilot falls down over the top of the stick, forcing the stick down, which then causes a major plunge. This may have been what happened to the flight flying between Unalakleet and Nome, a twin-engine craft that went down onto the ice in the Bering Sea. Tragically, that was 9 passengers and 1 pilot. So there was no co-pilot. So if that pilot died suddenly, and you know what would cause that, the same thing would have happened. He would have fallen over the stick. The stick would have pushed the nose of the plane straight down, and down would go the aircraft. Okay, so that's my take on those. And that's about it. I think that you're seeing that in many cases, these aircraft, the military has already admitted that they can control a Black Hawk with AI. It can function as a drone. And the question is, some of these other things, I don't know. Okay, let's see. Let me see. Okay, Rob Barabanoff. So you put in here, and I think this is a very good question. And it just scrolled down on me. Just a minute. I'm going to come back to it. Let's see. Where'd you go? Where'd you go, Rob? Come on, come on, come on. Okay. You say, I perceive the world leaders driven by the fallen watchers are playing with the curse put forth by Noach and agreed to by his sons, land agreement. Yeah. Now, I think that what you're talking about here, Rob, is that I think there is some evidence that the Nephilim, if you want to call them that, the fallen watchers, are back with us. Now, here's what I mean. I think that there was something that took place following World War II, where we went from a particular kind of aircraft. We had prop planes and so on, like the B-52, this kind of modification, that suddenly we switched over to titanium and jet engines, which allowed us to make a massive leap forward. This use of titanium and those kind of alloys may have been brought to the table by watchers who may have made themselves known at Roswell, New Mexico, or other places, Area 51. And when you look at what's happened with this Oreshnik, the nutcracker that the Russians introduced, the key that makes the Oreshnik work is the fact that their warheads are covered with an alloy that does not burn up. Now, we tried to use the rods from the gods, we called them, which were tungsten rods dropped from space, would come down. Once they hit, they blew up like a meteor. Great concept. Only problem is the rod burns up at 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature it hits on re-entry into the atmosphere. These are traveling at 10,000 miles an hour, or 12,000 miles an hour, or more. The temperature is over 10,000 degrees, and yet the alloy is not burning up. So when it hits, it brings with it all that temperature, all that force and everything else, and it hits like a meteorite, only with all that temperature, the kind of kinetic energy that's released in a dummy warhead. It has no explosive in it. It's a dummy warhead, but the alloy allows it to act with this huge explosiveness. And I think this technology was given to them, quite frankly, by other worldly leaders who are attempting to, by otherworldly characters, some of whom are trying to stop the nuclear destruction of Earth, which I believe happened once before. That's right, that the destruction of Earth happened once before by nuclear war. Now, Irene Caesar talks about this extensively. She says not only were nuclear weapons used, but plasma weapons were also used. And so she's had a good report, I think. All right, let's see. Yeah, SGI has been projected to arrive by 2030. Yeah, and 2030, I think that's super general intelligence, not just artificial general intelligence, but super general intelligence. It's going to get here a lot sooner than that 555. It's going to get here this year. It was projected to be here by 2050, and now it's 2030. And by the time we get to March, it'll be 2025. Okay, let's see. Jay Fisher says, years ago, I was off grid, not taking the market will take more than the physical can provide. Yeah, okay, hallelujah. Okay. Okay, thank you, Sherry Brooks. Hey, Ruby Costello, let's see about what the market, your video went blank when you explain it. Can you repeat it? Yeah. No, I'm going to leave it censored, Ruby. Just between me and you, I'm going to leave it censored. Yeah. Yeah, sorry it went dark. Yeah, but I'm going to leave it that way. Okay. All right. So Victor Masilov, Hallelujah, Yahweh El Shaddai El Elyon, Sidkenu, Makadash, Shalom. Hallowed be thy name, blessed be thy eternal glory. The great highest wisdom, beautiful and pure, is your divine love in Yahusha. Amen. Thank you, Victor. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So with that, let me see. We've got some more questions. I hate to leave without looking. Let's see. Yeah. Translate cursive writing. Yeah, that's needed, right? Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right. So I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it for our questions. So I want to thank you guys for being a fantastic audience tonight. Thank you for your questions, participating in the chat, and thank you for allowing me to come forward with this presentation. And I just want to bless you guys as much as I can and to give fair warning. Okay. So keep your eyes open. Recognize that the mark is almost here. The mark, the name, and the number, they're almost here. And you want to keep your name written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Okay, brothers and sisters, I'm going to call it a day, and I'm going to say thank you again and blessings to you in the name of Yahweh Sebaot. El Kadosh Akkad Yasharel. Elohai Yasharel. Avinu Ma'olam Vadolam. Okay, bye-bye.